Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Cleaner Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to welcome all members and officers to today's meeting. Just to confirm, as a council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings. I have not received notice that members or invited attendees wish to use Welsh today, therefore the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind you that this meeting is being webcast, therefore can I ask that you turn off silence your mobile phones and ensure that you speak clearly into your microphones. For your information, there are no planned fire drills today, but in case of fire alarm sounding, please follow the signs to exit the building. And I'm fairly sure we're all used to that procedure. Can I also remind all members to sign the attendance register and confirm if any apologies have been received for this meeting. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Gaynor James. This is her first meeting of this committee. I'm sure you're going to make a very valuable contribution, Gaynor. Okay, we'll move on to... can I have any apologies, Rachel, please?
Yes, we've received apologies from Councillor Ashley, Councillor Bevan, Councillor Stuart Evans, Councillor O'Connell, Councillor Shepherd.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Could I ask if any members should have any declarations of interest that they declare them now, and Tim is here from legal to give any advice if required. I'm not aware of any interest. Are there any? Tim, I don't think there are any interests.
No, I'm not anticipating any interest, Chair, and but if any arise during the course of the meeting later, just to remind members to please note it at the appropriate part of the attendance register, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I don't think we need you to stay, Tim. I'm sure you can make use elsewhere. Okay, can we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 3. This is the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of May. Please can I ask members to scan through the minutes for accuracy and confirm that the minutes are an accurate account of the meeting. Shall we quickly go through page by page? If I can find it. Yeah, sorry, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10. Happy that they are accurate? Somebody?
I'll move those, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can we move to item 4 of the agenda? Please could Rachel update members on the actions outstanding?
All actions are completed, so it's just for noting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think then, therefore, we can quickly move on to item 5 of the agenda, and I think we need to invite the officers into the meeting. Okay, I'd like to welcome the 2 officers. We've got Stephen Jarrett, who's the Assistant Chief Officer, Technical Services, Neighbourhoods, Planning and Public Protection. That's a long title, Stephen. And we've got Cunnan Edwards, who's the Group Leader for Waste. Now, we've already discussed at a pre-meeting this list of actions, so I'm not proposing that we go through that again. What we've agreed we're going to do today is we're going to invite officers, members to ask officers questions. So if you turn to the papers on this, which are on the page numbers, seem a little bit, these are the right ones, Kath?
Yeah, that's them.
Yeah, it starts at page 1 again. If we quickly go through, sorry, page 20, yeah, the numbers are right. If we go through each one, so the first one is on page 26. The page numbers are on the side, not on the bottom of the page. Any questions on the first item, which is the develop a single integrated strategy for the waste management estate? Do we have any questions on this item for the officers? Is that? Yeah, there is one question, which I will ask then. Has an external consultant been appointed yet, and what are the timescales they have been given to deliver the strategy?
Thank you, Councillor. Not as yet. The brief is in its final draft stage. I've spoken with colleagues in procurement who are looking at the moment for us, or on behalf of us, for the award criteria. Once our award criteria has been agreed with colleagues from procurement, then we'll be looking to tender that in the most appropriate way, be it sort of an open tender or framework type tender. So not appointed as yet.
So what sort of time frame are you thinking about? Can you give us a rough estimate of when you
I think for the benefit of this committee, we're looking to bring the draft back to the committee, and we'd be looking to do that this year.
Okay. Norma?
No, not on.
No. Okay. So that's the only question on that one, Stephen. Can we move on to the next item, which is page 26? Any questions on this one?
Proposal 2?
No. Proposal 3? Yeah. Yes, please. No. Norma's last question.
In your response to proposal for improvement 3, you state that staff are regularly reminded of the service standards. How often do you remind residents?
I'll answer that one. As far as the residents, we try to, we don't normally refer back to being service standards. What we try and do is promote key messages from within the service standards. So this year, for example, we've identified as in my team, in the waste team plan, one of the key problems that we're encountering is residents not using nets. So it's a contributing factor to items being blown around, falling out of recycling boxes, for example. So whilst we worked with the crews to try and ensure that they do and undertake their collections properly to pick up any items they drop, what we're finding when we're doing our mystery shopping and looking in an area is before we arrive, there are sometimes items already being blown out of the boxes. And when we look at the use of nets, even though on average we've delivered around about 2 to 3 nets per property in Torvine, less than 20% of people are actually using the nets. So one of the areas that we're looking to focus on, whilst we don't link it directly to say it's a service standard, what we're going to be doing a campaign this year is to try and encourage people to use the nets and obviously provide additional nets to residents who say they haven't got them. We've done things like when we deliver boxes, we provide nets with the boxes. We try and attach them beforehand so that they're already there. But we're really keen to get that because it makes a real difference to the streets in Torvine if nets are used.
It's a good idea to attach them ready because I think that's what residents find difficult. I know you can use the garden ties. That's what I tell people, that firmly fixes them. But yes, it is a bit fiddly for some people, to do that, especially the elderly.
Yeah, we found it is very fiddly. In fact, there's a string that comes in with it to tie on. It's the same as the shoelaces, they come undone, so they're not the best, whereas the cable ties, which is what we use, are really effective because they pretty much, unless we get a pair of scissors, they permanently attach them onto the box.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
So we'll move on to the proposal 4. Any questions? I've got one question on this one. Anyone else got a question before I ask? Just on this one, when I think it was Rachel Jowett was talking to committee earlier last year, and it's mentioned in here about you're trying to get away from reliance on agency staff. How are you getting on with that?
Yeah, we're doing okay with that. It sounds easy to do, but in order to test it, we've gone through a number of different scenarios where financially we're testing it, as well as operationally. So we're kind of testing each other to think of, well, what would happen in this scenario, what would happen in that scenario. We've got to a point now where we're comfortable that financially it'll work. And the numbers of staff we need to employ to replace the agency for the cover, we're comfortable with that. It's for me now to take back to Rachel and discuss through with her how we go about progressing that scenario and ensuring we can, we stay resilient even with that scenario in place. So again, progressing, Chair.
I was just wondering whether you ever do like a survey with the actual workers in the job so that they could come back with ideas to improve the service themselves. So I know, although it was several years ago when I worked with them, only for 2 days, a lot of them had lots of good ideas, and I just thought, well, perhaps sometimes the best people to ask are the people actually doing the job. So just wondering whether you actually do a survey with them.
Chief Officer has spent quite a bit of time with all staff within neighbourhood services, including the workforce, to try and encourage them to feedback ideas on how we can do things better and more efficiently. And in fact, agency working is one of the points that the crews have raised themselves. Just want to clarify the point on agency working. We have a full sort of set number of positions to carry out the service, and we have full-time staff to undertake all of those activities. What we use the agency for is to cover people on holiday or on sickness, or when there's an issue where people have left for a variety of reasons. In the interim, until we can carry out a recruitment, then we'll use agency. So it's not that we have a complement of agency because we're not filling posts, but what we're now doing is we're looking at introducing a pool of permanent staff, additional positions effectively, but they cover the holidays and sickness, so it's a change in that. We've already made, since the Welsh Audit Office review, we'd already put in place, for example, training of our existing loaders. So again, feedback from feedback from the crews. They were saying they would like to be trained to become HGV drivers. So we trained a number of our loaders to become HGV drivers, which enabled them to cover when we had our existing drivers on annual leave and holidays and sickness. So that then means that we're keeping the skills within the workforce and getting them to work. So as you say, Councillor, that it is critical that we listen to the crews to get some of those ideas, because they are really, really useful, and the crews are always keen to work and implement some of the ideas.
Thank you, Karen, that's helpful. Shall we move on? Sorry, of course you can. No.
Following up on the HGV, when we have snow, does that help then if you've got more drivers for the vehicles? Because I know the same drivers have to do the bins and the snow clearance. So would that be a help at times like that?
Part of the frustration is a waste group leader, so I'm just focusing on waste here. Remember, there's the keeping the streets open in Torvine. It's very frustrating for waste because, yes, we've trained all those guys to be HGV drivers, but they're taken off me to do the snow clearances. So whilst, yes, it is very useful to have them for the rest of the year because they're always able to provide the cover, during the periods of snow, they're added resource and really effective resource for undertaking snow clearances and providing sort of cover for the gritters. But it doesn't actually, unfortunately, help my cause. It doesn't make things worse, but it just means that I've, 1 minute I'm thinking I'm gaining it at that period of time and they've gone.
Sort of giving with one hand and taking it away with another, yes.
But, the caveat in there, then we're looking at the whole of Torvine, which is really important. We need to keep the streets open and get them open as quickly as we can. So whilst it's frustrating within the service and frustrating for residents who want to have their waste collected, it is critical that we get the streets safe as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to pick up that, following the particular events we had this year, the 3 snow events, which were problematic in themselves compared to previous winters, we are looking across the department about how we can make ourselves more resilient and reduce our reliance for winter service operations on the waste section, and try and sort of spread the burden a little bit more. It's just that the waste service, being the service it is with the vehicles it's got, has the most resource in terms of drivers, but we need to try and balance out with the services we need to provide then for waste as soon as roads are clear again.
Thank you for that. Okay, shall we move on to, I've lost my name now, is it proposal 5? Any questions on this one? No, we move on. Proposal 6. Anything on this? Give you a chance to have a look. Okay, no. Proposal 7. Sorry, Alan.
Mr. President, thank you. Sorry, Chair. I've just got one query, and it relates back to the start in terms of the external consultant. And given the pressure that the department's been under, I'm just wondering how we can actually demonstrate the improvement from our trade and our communications processes. Where is the actual evidence to say that those things are actually delivering real improvement, other than some of the, shall we say, physical things that we've done that we pushed into the system?
I'm not sure of the button. I can just using the example earlier about the training of the loaders to become drivers. That's made a huge difference operationally for us. The scenario we were encountering was, whilst we can control our holidays as best as we can, so we've got or had agency drivers to cover the positions, what we can't control is when individuals go off sick. So in that scenario, then we would contact the agency to ask have they got any drivers available to provide cover, and quite often the answer was no. So the scenario then was that we weren't able to get either individual rounds out, or we would have to stop a particular service, whether it was a bulky collection or container deliveries, in order to keep the rest of the service running. So that posed a huge problem operationally. Now, what we've done in trying to multi-scale and doing that training activity and providing that, and it's HGV training is a lot of training for the individuals. In addition to that, you have to have CPC training, which is a competency training for the drivers as well. Now that they're in post, we're better able to deal with that situation. So other than snow, what we are able to do is utilise those people and pull them off from being loading to actually driving a vehicle. Getting loaders from agencies is a lot easier, and even if we're unable to do that, we still have one loader, so we can start the round and then get other members of the teams then to assist later on. It's when you can't get a vehicle out that causes the biggest problem. So that's an example of one operationally not only is better for us, but it's helped with regards to the residents as well, to reduce the number of missed collections. With the complaints are now plummeted to next to nothing for the whole service. So that's something that we can actually measure within the interactions that the department's received.
Yeah, my point is really, you showed me one example. There are lots of other people who receive training. There's lots of other communication goes on. What I'm actually saying is, how can we demonstrate that improvement? How is that output really measured, so we can say, yes, that's been effective and it's producing this output?
On that first one, it's reduced complaints. On the example I've given, it's reduced complaints.
Sorry, I'm trying to be a little bit more holistic and talk about overall. You can say there's one example, we've done it. Can we demonstrate that across the piece, and could we see that in terms of the increased improvements through that activity?
Other than reduced complaints, we obviously collect the waste, so that's collected at various points. The complaints normally indicate that the service is failing to deliver. So as a result, the attempts that we put in place to try and address those issues through training, for example, has reduced the number of complaints, which suggests that we're meeting our service standards a lot better than we were previously.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that as one measure, but I think as well there are other things in terms of cost and output, where we're more efficient. There are lots of other little issues that come into this in terms of, say, we're delivering a better service rather than just the gold standard of complaints. I mean, for instance, those complaints can also be broken down into various elements, can't they?
Can I suggest we pick this up, Alan, in terms of when we look at recommendations that we're going to make, rather than have a long discussion there? Thank you. Can I just pick up on one other question? I mean, we've been chatting about agency staff, etc. What's happening in terms of absence rates with crews? I mean, you must be monitoring that. Is it stable? Is it going down? I mean, that's another measure. Can you give us some indication on that?
Yeah, we monitor absence rates. The council's brought in, over the last couple of years, council now have brought in different systems. There's a Bradford scoring, which tries to encourage or to monitor the number of absence periods, and over a period of time, if there's continual absences, then it can be dealt with through engagement with the manager and also with HR as well. So if it needs to go through aspects of disciplinary, then it needs to go through that sort of monitoring as well. Sickness levels, we've benchmarked ourselves with other local authorities, and our operational waste is exactly the same level as other local authorities. They tend to be higher than office staff, but they're not significantly higher. I think it's lower than it used to be, again, a couple of years ago, but that's possibly down to some of the work that we've done through with HR, with updating the policies and changing the policies.
So what you're saying, the trend is, you think the trend is downward, is it?
The trend was certainly initially downwards. I don't know what it is specifically in the last year, but it's been stable, certainly within our team, within waste. I'm not sure the rest of the operational staff within the rest of neighbourhood services.
Yeah, it's just another measure in terms of that obviously impacts on your reliance on agency. So perhaps that's something that you should be keeping an eye on. Yeah. We'll move on. We were on proposal 8, I believe. 7. Any questions on 7? Giles?
Yeah, on proposal 7, it says provide channels through which individual staff members can feed back to their managers in relation to performance issues. I was wondering whether there's anything in place like Ask Alison, so that actual people, they can go on the workers and log on to Swoop or something and put their feedback about the managers. I find personally Ask Alison is a very good resource as a councillor, because it gives me an understanding of what the staff are actually thinking about, not only working for Torving, but as councillors as well, and how we can improve. So I thought if we had something like, ask, not like Alison, but ask, could be Rachel, we could log on then as well as members and actually, get a feeling of what people's actually thinking and ways we could improve, not only as a council towards our employees, but perhaps help you out as managers and address some of the problems they have.
It's a good idea. We don't have an Ask Canon or Ask Steve or anything like that. We don't have that system in place. A number of our crews have expressed that they don't, certainly the interaction with us, they don't tend to use technology. Some of them do. Some of them use, all the phones and the like, but a lot of the staff, unfortunately, are not comfortable about doing that. So, for example, overtime or annual leave, holidays and the like, which is now electronic, often the crews are uncomfortable and unable to do that themselves, so they ask members of management to be able to undertake that on their behalf. So we provide some assistance to them. So what we do instead is we try by having toolbox talks. So that's where we bring in, it's not individual, but it's bringing in the team together into a meeting room in smaller groups to have a discussion about issues that relates to them, what they feel is important. So we'll have messages from us that we need to address. So it could be an issue with performance with the individual crews, or it could be an issue with regards to some changes that we're putting in. But as far as the rest of the meeting, it's an opportunity to flag up issues. So I was actually talking to one of my colleagues today, because there's another one happening with another team tomorrow, and one that happened earlier on this week. And it's also the best opportunity to get the crews of, for example, refuse. They work together, but when they're out on the round, they're on different rounds, so they don't talk to each other because they're off doing their own bits. So it's when they're together in this forum is the best time to address issues between the individual rounds, because whilst managers might think they know, as you say, what's going on, it's the crews that really know what problems exist out on the streets with regards to their collections. So having that feedback, certainly as a team, works quite effectively. Hopefully that they're able to feed that back. But as you say, we don't really have an ask, process. So it's more done on a team basis.
Thank you, Chair. On proposal 7, the actual rounds themselves, being reviewed. Do you talk to the staff about you know, a particular street could go on this round or a particular street could go on that round. That would speed things up, help them along, lessen the stress of their workload. Is that being done?
Yeah, it happens in both processes. Exactly what I was just highlighting just now. As a team, when they come together, a lot of the issues can be addressed really quickly. The other process which happens is individual drivers will come in and highlight, I'm struggling on my round because this area has suddenly got a lot heavier, it's taking more time, can you take a street off me? Doing it that way works, so we'll pick a round that we can see has possibly more flexibility, so we move that street onto them and then we have a discussion. But as you can appreciate, that involves a few days to be able to have that conversation between the crews. When we have the toolbox talks, they're there together at the same time, and between them they're able to work it out. The worst scenario for a waste service, our waste service, is if they sort it out amongst themselves. Because if they sort it out amongst themselves, we don't know who's actually undertaking those collections. So if there's a problem in the area, then we'll struggle to find who it is that's actually affected the problem. So hence we encourage them to come back to us with any issues they've got if they feel they need to change the rounds. In addition to that, originally when the rounds were created, they were created using computer software effectively to try and smooth out the rounds. And in that process, when we created, if you like, the draft rounds, this is when we rolled out skinny bins, literally a couple of months beforehand, those rounds were then laid out with those individual drivers to look at the rounds to see what they believed could work better, because a computer works well, and it does do a reasonably good job at working at efficiency, especially the newer software that's available. But the drivers themselves then took ownership of the rounds and suggested different modifications, and most of those modifications happened at that time within the first couple of months of us rolling out skinny bin. And we timed it so we did that before the skinny bin, so we didn't do everything in one go. But it happened behind the scenes, and the crews worked together. Additionally, as a final point, each of the teams work in their units. So refuse workers, one team, food and cardboard workers, another team, recycling is another team, and green is another team. And there's communication between them each day through the charge hand, who actually, if there's a problem with a vehicle breaking down or it just so happens it's been heavy on a particular round for a particular day for a reason, they will then encourage the other drivers to come and assist. Again, they don't see each other, but they get allocated onto the round. So the key point is they do have a forum to feed the information back, and it's important we listen to that and amend it then, because if they do it on their own, it causes problems.
I just wonder whether there's a time limit for each round, because we often see the refuse crews rushing like mad to complete their round, to bring the round. Is there a set time that they've got to do their rounds? And that's why sometimes they don't always, perhaps they drop something, residents say, oh, we don't see them sweeping it up, but they like on a time scale, so they've got to get back by a set time.
No, they're not. It's just a normal working day. So they've got their 7.5, 8 hour days. None of the rounds are beyond that period of time, so there's no reason for them to be rushing around. They've got sufficient time on all of the rounds to complete them within the days. They've got plenty of capacity.
Yeah, just quickly on that. It's a normal working day, or is it job and knock? Because if it's job and knock, then that might be the reason why they've banged it out and gone.
The crews work together in order to finish the collection rounds. So when they finish their rounds, they may well come back to the yard, but they've still got to do the vehicle checks, clean and wash the vehicles. So they've still got activities. Even though they're back in the yard, they still undertake other bits in order to complete it. In addition to that, when we have our meetings with the crews, we need to have that time to be able to do that as well. So it's not as simple as just the collection rounds. There's times when they're doing the collections, but there are other activities they do in addition to that as well.
Okay, can we move on to Proposal 8? Any questions on Proposal 8? Okay, we'll move on to Proposal 9. Is this the last one, Gav? Any questions on Proposal 9, Norma? No? Any? Okay. Yes, Stephen?
Could I just go back to the Ask Alison question? Kind of mentioned how we engage with the teams, but certainly all the individual operatives know that they can come to particularly anyone within the organisation if they did want to come to Cunnan, if they did want to come to me, if they did want to come to Rachel. That's been made clear at engagement sessions with them, and I'm sure it's certainly it's been taken up on occasion with me. I'm sure it has with Cunnan on occasion, and quite possibly Rachel as well. So much as there's not a recording system like the Ask Alison where members can look and see what the theme of any questions, the operatives, much as they're frontline operatives without the technology sometimes that everybody else has in terms of laptops and things like that, still do have the opportunity of Ask Alison effectively.
Thanks. Any boards of Ask Alison, as I said, as a council, I find it is a real good resource for us. I think every council, if you've got 5 minutes, should read it, because it really puts your finger on the pulse of what the actual ticking council is actually thinking, and with us basically running the council, it's good to have that feedback to make us do our jobs perhaps better or improve.
I do know some of the crews have put on questions on Ask Alison, but as I say, the very few that would do that. But I know a few of them because, as Steve said, they're always chatting and they're coming into the office. We're lucky enough in the waste team. We're all based in the same sort of building, in the same office, so it makes it very easy for the crews to come in and have that interaction.
Okay, that's the end of the questions. I'd like to thank Stephen and Cunnan for their time, and I can invite them to leave the meeting now so that we can formulate any recommendations that we have. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Okay, the meeting's continuing now. What I just said was that we'd now think about if we had any recommendations in relation to these 9 proposals. Now, there were 3 things that I noted that Kath can no doubt add to this. Alan, I stopped that conversation you were having slightly because I didn't think it was going very far in terms of the answers you were getting. So perhaps we need to put something down around that. Do you want to suggest something, Alan, on that? Sorry, putting you on the spot, but
Yeah, it's really, can we see some tangible... Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's actually to see whether we can get some tangible outputs from the training and communication exercises that are taking place. It appears that there's quite a lot of it going on, but what is the result of it? It's all, in essence, I shouldn't say hearsay, but it's almost that we're getting ad hoc comments about this, that and the other. But what's the real output? What is the result of that activity?
I think the reason I cut that conversation short, I felt the officers, it'd be better if they had a little bit more time to consider that, because I don't think we were getting very far with that question. So we'll I'm sure you were happy with that, Alan. You indicated at the time. The second issue that I've noted, and Kath, I'm going to bring you in a minute, was I was interested in absence rates simply because we've had lots of discussions about the reliance on agency. So I think I would be interested in having a look at the trend for ourselves. So that's something we could perhaps ask them to provide to us. Benchmarking against local authorities, I felt it was a little bit woolly. I'd just be interested in that. So if we could have something on that. And then we had, the third thing I noted, we had quite a discussion around this Ask Alison issue, which Giles raised. Giles, do you want to put a recommendation in around that?
I just find that there's sometimes people that like to report things anonymously, whether they got like a box with paper, on a paper just list logs, because sometimes people have got a fear of going to management. I've had discussions before with some of the crew, and I've been out working with them, and they've told me things like and said that sometimes we feel uncomfortable, talking about this to people but because I was with them for the day, they just took me as part of the team and just poured their hearts out to me. So I just like to see there's a way of them, can put a complaint or an issue in as a member of this council of staff, which we can have feedback to. We can give feedback as a council ourselves and have access to those questions, because it's okay having a meeting, but I know in my works, if you have a group meeting, there's a lot of people who stay silent because in a meeting situation that they can't speak. So I like some sort of either paper, electronic, so that we could have a list of any issues they've got, so we can address them.
I think I agree with you, Jazz. I think that's fair enough. I think we'll put a recommendation in. If they can consider a system, we'll just say similar to Ask Alison. Yes, well, I think that's fair enough. I mean, Stephen did mention that sometimes he does get approached directly, so it's another avenue for the staff, I think. So I think we should ask them to consider it. They were the 3 points that I jotted down. Kath, did you have any others in addition to that? Am I missing anything from members?
I was just going to say, at the end of the day, our staff are our biggest asset, and and sometimes we overlook that. And if they've got any issues, there should be a way of them getting like the Ask Alison system, that everybody can read it and find out exactly what's going on, whether it's anonymous or not.
So we've come up with those 3 recommendations on that issue. We'll stop there now. We move on to the next item on the agenda. So it's again the green energy, in particular the use of solar technology. So we need to welcome the officers to the meeting. Rachel, can you go and get the officers, please? Okay, the meeting's going to continue now, and obviously the item on the agenda is green energy, in particular the use of solar technologies. I'd like to welcome colleagues to the meeting. I'll just read out who's who. And we've got Stephen Jarrett, and I'm not going to repeat your long title, Stephen. We've done that earlier on. I've got Paul Evans, who's the Property Management Group Leader. Got that right, Paul? I've got Alan Jones, who's the Energy Manager, and Joe Wall, you're the Expert Advisor on Solar Renewable Technology for Local Partnerships. Okay, welcome. Can I ask officers now to provide a summary of the report before members ask questions? I don't know who's going to lead on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just speak briefly to the report, picking up a couple of aspects just to highlight for us. Section 1 on page 37, just some background on the work we've done to date and a couple of reasons of why we need to be looking at what we've been looking at. In paragraph 1.7, I pick up that the Council or us as Neighbourhood Services, Planning Public Protection, have been working with local partnerships on this particular issue. In 1.9 and 1.10 then highlight the sort of things we looked at from a long list of 20 possible locations for renewables, whittling down to a short list, which we're now progressing on again. Highlighting 1.12, that Teacock was, the former landfill site that is, was highlighted as a possible site. Then in paragraph 1.6, just highlight that Teacock does have the potential to provide long-term income to the Council and deliver on a number of strategies in terms of carbon reduction. So going on to section 2, some further information in the opening paragraphs of section 2 about what we're looking to do. And then highlight in section 2.7 that we've, with local partnerships, have produced the outline business case following the five-case business plan. In 2.8, pick up the option of a 3.85 megawatt solar farm with capital expenditure and then the rate of returning. 2.12 and 2.13 then just explain where we looked at, how we looked at it, and assessed then against the high-level factors we wanted to screen the potential sites against. In 2.15, just highlight that the particular opportunities and constraints of the T-Coch former landfill site. 218 and 219 just raise the issue of the connection to the grid and the commitment we've made initially to get that work in progress with WPD. Section 220 highlight the delivery plan given the key milestones. And then that's in Appendix 4 in the report. Moving on to the financial case, 2.21, we highlight, from the work we've done to date, the T-Coch solar farm demonstrates a fundable and affordable deal for the council. But in 2.23, note that the financial work is still ongoing, so we will continue to see how that impacts on the expenditure and income of the council and cash flowing. Moving on to section 230 through to 235, that's the work we've done to date. So there's consultation with various officers of the council, including and obviously the leader. We've talked to our planning division, and we've considered other aspects of work ongoing in the area as well. In section 3, we highlight the national need for renewables in the national picture, and also things that we've done as a council to generate electricity from renewables. Section 3.5, this is always a useful section, I feel, in what is quite a technical report. We just put together a comparison of what generation generation we've got and what that means in terms of how it relates to the existing consumptions and carbon outputs. If I could take you then to section 5, Chair, just running through the conclusions of what we've got. We looked at our assets to see if we could expand on our renewable portfolio. In carrying out the asset survey, we came up with T-Coch former landfill site as a preferred option. Looks fundable. We're now in the process of putting that through the necessary processes. And then in section 6, it follows on that, in terms of bringing scrutiny, it's not a departure for the council in terms of what we've done, because we have done renewables previously, but it's perhaps a more significant renewable scheme than we have done previously. So in terms of things we'd like from scrutiny, we've highlighted a number of specific things there in section 6. And with that, Chair, unless there are any questions of me, I'll start.
Thank you, Stephen. This is a rather technical report, and I certainly found it a difficult read, and I'm sure my colleagues also found it difficult. So please bear with us if some of the questions we ask you might think are a little strange, but with these technical reports, it's difficult for a non-expert, a lame person, if you like. But I think we'll go straight into questions now from members of the committee. So I'm going to start off with Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephen, for that. My question is, how confident are you that this project will deliver true benefits to the council, and how much do you actually believe in this project?
Yeah, okay, so I think there's quite a good feeling at the moment on what we're looking at, and obviously a lot of this is based on forecasts, but the forecasts that we're using are national recognised forecasts, things that Welsh Government have put together as well. I think it's quite an exciting scheme that we're looking at. Looking at the figures that are coming out from the forecasts, it's definitely fundable. It's getting to a point where how much funding you're going to get in the early years rather than in the long term of the project. I think if there's any sort of concern, that's the bit of concern really, where we want balance around what do we do, and a bit of guidance there from a political side of things as well. Joe, do you want to add anything to that?
I think there's a number of things here in that the uncertainty around it. I mean, I've developed a lot of solar over the years. I've developed and deployed about 300 megawatts in the UK. I used to be development director for one of the UK's largest solar developers. I've done quite a lot of this over the years. Obviously, post-subsidy, the income regime is very different. And what we've been looking at on the income side is two things, really. One is potentially an arrangement with the Welsh Government that would provide a guaranteed level of income in terms of price, but also looking at the forward forecasts produced both by the Department of Business, Enterprise, Industry and Skills, BEIS, who produce long-term energy forecast prices, and also the Welsh Government have invested in Baringa, which is one of the two main commercially used indices for forward price forecasting. The other thing we've been looking at with that is obviously you purchase as well as sell electricity. So you buy more electricity than you're going to be producing and selling through this. So if the prices don't do what the forecasts suggest, and the price of electricity doesn't go up as fast as we've forecast, your overall electricity bill will reduce because your purchasing costs will reduce. So what you've got in there is what's known as a hedge against your future purchases. So it's not that easy to explain it sort of simply and quickly, but in effect, if you choose not to go with the Welsh Government arrangement, you've got some sort of insurance around where the money would come from if it didn't generate what you hoped it would, because your cost of electricity would be less than you were expecting it to be. If, however, prices go up faster, this provides you with some benefit from that. So it just, in effect, dampens that effect of the market. In terms of levels of confidence, the income side, I'm pretty confident in terms of what you would output from the solar farm. Solar's a fairly established technology. It's reasonably well understood what you could expect to generate from a solar farm, both in terms of the data that's publicly available in terms of radiance, how much the sun shines, but also in terms of the engineering data on performance ratio and what you would expect to get in terms of generation from each panel you install. The bit that is a little more difficult to forecast at the moment is the capital cost up front. And that's partly because there's been a lot less deployment of large-scale solar in the UK over the last 2 years since the subsidy regime disappeared. So we've been doing some ongoing soft market testing on that. There are one or two of the larger funds that are still building in the UK. And our pricing in this model is about 15% higher than the soft market test figures are indicating at the moment, but it is very sensitive to exchange rates because a lot of the equipment is purchased in dollars and dollar cents. So it's one of those things where as we get further down the line, we get towards a full business case and we've gone through a procurement, we'll have the final figures, but at the moment we've taken a fairly prudent approach in terms of how we put the numbers together.
Just come back. Later on, one of the questions we were going to discuss is, can you talk us through the financial aspects of the project? Well, obviously, this is what you've been doing now. No, this is fine. So I think if the committee is happy, we'll deal with this issue now. And obviously, from a councillor perspective, I'm speaking on behalf of the committee here, I think, what we're interested in is what's the risk to the council here. And we weren't fully clear of the capital expenditure, which you've touched on, and then what the income stream is likely to be. And it didn't appear from the figures that we were going to actually make, if you like, a profit. Now, can you just elaborate a little bit on that, please?
I think...
Yeah, I'll bring the other gentleman in.
Sorry, so from where we are at the moment, we're still doing some quite high-level assessments on the site itself. So a lot of this will come into how much the capital costs are going to be at the end. We've secured a grid connection from Western Power, so we know the cost of that one. That's set in stone. We have got another option that we're still investigating with Western Power, so we get a lower grid connection to try and get a better value. We are going to be asking for Western Power to start looking at some of the, what they call statements of works, Joe? Statement of works that the actual grid have to do, and we need to get a cost on that as well. We're looking at ground investigations, we're looking at ecology, all of those factors are coming in here, we're looking at topography of the land and so on. Until we got that, we're not in a position really to give a full specification to go out to tender on. But those works that we are doing at the moment, all the experts we've spoken to are finding it that it is quite favourable. So we are edging on the side of ecology is looking okay. Site investigation is going on today. It's the old former tip site, as you know, so that is that obviously has an element to it, which is why we have to do the ground investigations. But a solar farm kind of suits that type of ground as well, because the way we can build it and the way we can construct it, it's not having to dig huge foundations down into the ground. And that also is a factor around if we're going to pilot or if we're going to do some just laying blocks and concrete beams and things to hold it in place. So there's still quite a bit of work to do on the capital side, and that's where the forecasts are coming in, really. We're estimating a lot of that at the moment.
Can I just, from my perspective, I just want to understand the process here in terms of, perhaps this is one for Stephen, in terms of the council business. Obviously, from that, what you've just said, there's still a degree of uncertainty, particularly in terms of capital and work to be done. Now, it's coming to committee today with these uncertainties, and then the next stage is going to cabinet. Now, how will cabinet be able to make a decision with all these uncertainties, and how are we as a committee going to be able to deal with this, with all this degree of uncertainty at this stage? It seems a little bit premature, if you like. I'm going to bring the other councillors in. Let me bring the other councillors in and you can deal with it.
Yeah, Chair, just, I suppose what I'm trying to look at, I mean, don't get me wrong, this is a great idea, and it, you know, if it works, it's fantastic. What I'm worried about is if this is just a tick box to say we've done it, but I want to be confident in the officers being confident that this will actually benefit Torvine. And I mean, all I'm hearing at the moment is this figure is all forecast this and forecast that. That's great, but if it's just a tick box, then it's a lot of money, and further down the line, there's going to be a lot of maintenance. I just feel I need to feel confident that you guys are confident in this project.
I just wondered what the lifespan of the solar cells would be versus the cost, and also at the end of the scheme, the cost of disposal of the cells and panels after the scheme. Is there anything in place for recycling, or is there going to be any disposal costs? There's a lot of other things I'd like to learn about, like how long does a solar cell last?
Alan, and then we'll go back to officers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a number of questions about finance, some which can come a little later, and some of which might have been scratched off now because of what we've been told. But I'm a little bit worried about forecasts because we looked at the paper that went in October to the council in terms of releasing 12k to look at some of the feasibility of this. We were stating in there that there was a capital cost of 3.7 million at that stage, with an internal return of I think 5.23%, but then showing an overall benefit to the council after all capital costs have been repaid of £5 million. Now that's drastically altered from that one to this one, so I'll just leave it at that at this stage. That change really worries me.
Bring the officers back in now, if you can try and answer those sets of questions, please.
I think uncertainty is a difficult one. We would like to be in a stronger position and further down the line in some ways, and have all these costs bottomed out. The programme we're trying to get to in terms of install requires us to come to you sort of fairly early in the process. The information we'll have by the time we go to Cabinet, appreciate the Cabinet won't be able to make a decision if there's a significant level of uncertainty, whether they'll be looking to a principal decision, as in we're looking for sort of some principal thoughts from this committee as well. Whether we'll be in that position, I'm not quite sure. Forecasting is always going to be a difficult one. Joe picked up on the particular ones where forecasting will be used, and it will be necessary. We won't know for certainty what the price of electricity will be in 25, 30, 35 years' time of the scenarios we're modelling at the moment. I certainly appreciate the points about there isn't detail on the costings for you, and we can't provide those at the moment. If you could kind of put those not to one side, but accept that that's the position at the moment. I certainly don't think that the council would be looking to progress a scheme if in 6 months' time it shows it's not financially beneficial. I don't think the council would be looking to subsidise this in order to hit some other targets. I'll pass on to others now to perhaps pick up the other aspects of those questions.
The previous forecast that was mentioned, the report back in November, that was based on a 5 megawatt solar farm. Obviously, we've now looked at all the various issues and some competing options, and we decided to go for 3.85. So therefore, you will get less income on that because of scale. The capital cost will be less because of the scale as well is reduced. So that's where that sort of process has come from. On the energy pricing, the base forecast is 2.5%. That in April this year, our electricity prices increased by 3.6%. So we're always seeing increases above what the forecasts are. And you will see yesterday, I think, another energy company decided to raise their prices by 5%. So it is difficult to forecast the energy price going forward. But from all the evidence I've looked at from council energy actual paying bills, going back for 20 odd years, we've been very conservative in that what that benefit income stream would be. We think it would be more, but we have to work with what's the recognised forecasts.
First, just to stay on this point, then I've got a couple of.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate some of these assumptions are very difficult because there's a market. We are talking 35 years and the rest of it. But my worry is yeah, you're right. We moved from 5 to 3.85. But what I can't see is, should we perhaps instead of this take a 5 somewhere else? Is there another site where we could do a 5 and get a better rate of return? I have another question on returns after, but we can't see clearly what some of the other alternatives would do for us in terms of this paper.
Yeah, I think, to answer your question about can we take this somewhere else, within the OBC we put the table in where we've assessed on what land is available. Because of, I think, it being a little bit new and long term and understanding forecasts early in the stage and having to come to you at this stage, Teacock was seen as one of the most viable sites, mainly because the grid connection to Western Power is a big element, and it has a grid connection right on its doorstep, basically. So the land isn't being used for much else. We're struggling to sell the land or use the land under its current planning status. So it just seemed a good one to look at. And this is almost a pilot project, really, to start allaying some of these concerns and saying how confident we are in it. I think this is probably the one to start with. And that's what we were looking at as a team. But Steve's quite right. If we're progressing through this and we get to a stage where the figures aren't adding up, then it just stops. We see where we are.
So then, David.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask the question: what evidence there is of being of success on this type of project elsewhere?
There are, to my knowledge, a number of local authorities that have solar farms and generate income from them, and if you wanted to speak to them, I'm sure that they would more than happily share information. So your most local is Monmouth. West Suffolk also have a decent size. They are subsidised schemes, so they are slightly different. In terms of some of the other points that have been coming up about cost and certainty and process, the process that we've been trying to take this through is an outline business case, and it would come back for a final approval at full business case once it's been through a procurement and the numbers are much more certain. So it is a bit chicken and egg, and we do have to go through that process to go to procurement and to finalise the numbers. In terms of the contracts that you would enter into to deliver this, they are fixed price contracts. I've built a number of these over the years. I've never known one go over. They do tend to stay very much to the fixed price once you've got that price as well. So at the point you actually signed it off as an authority, you would have certainty in relation to cost. And in terms of returns, you would have a choice as to whether you wanted to try and take the certainty offered by the Welsh Government opportunity of an index-linked starting price and reduce the risk but potentially reduce the benefits, or whether you wanted to take a market hedge approach against your own energy costs. So you've got choices about how you manage those risks. In terms of the numbers themselves and how much confidence we've got in them, we have got quite a detailed financial model that sits behind this, that's broken down into most of the elements that we would expect. So that includes things like costs of operation and maintenance, it includes business rates, it includes insurance, it includes construction costs, it includes development costs, project management. So there is quite a lot of information that's gone into there, and each of those pieces of information have been soft market tested. Some of them have gone beyond that and gone into tender process as well. So a lot of that information we have actually got, we've got a high level of confidence in. A couple of the other questions that have come up in terms of things like lifespan and costs of disposal. So lifespan of solar, you would normally expect the modules to have a guarantee, a warranty of 20 to 25 years, depending on the manufacturer. And you would expect them to have a working life beyond that. So there are plants in Europe now that are 30, 35 years old and still functioning. Most of the big solar developers in the UK started with 25-year projects, and that was really because that's what the feed-in tariff was. So the original expectation was that we'd go with 25 years because that was where the subsidy was. Most of the owners of those schemes are actively out in the market at the moment, renegotiating and extending leases, and also starting to seek to extend the planning consents that sit around them, because they think that those plants have got lifespans. Most of them are targeting a 40-year lifespan at the moment. In terms of costs of disposal, there's quite a lot of valuable equipment in solar farms, and quite a lot of that is recyclable. And whilst there is no certainty as of exactly what it will cost to decommission, it's not expected that there's going to be a lot of hazardous materials in there, and there are a lot of relatively valuable metals in the cables, in the mounting structures, in the panel frames, and indeed in the silicon wafers in the cells themselves. So again, the market expectation is that decommissioning costs will be covered by the cost of recycling the materials.
David, want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pretty well versed with solar farms and solar energy and all the rest of it. Okay, so I understand all the benefits to it. That's fine. What I'm looking for is to feel confident from the officers. And I look at Stephen. He's an excellent officer, and I trust in what he says. I'm just looking for that bit of confidence from you guys to say to me, we think this is going to benefit the council. That's what I'm looking for. I mean, the closest farms to us are Hentless and Limestone, and I do deal with those farms as well. But that I need to know, from my point of view, that you guys you believe in it. I'm just not getting that at the moment.
I think you can take that. We've got a project that's progressed to a stage that we're at the moment. We've talked about it internally, so it's not just officers within neighbourhoods. We've been to senior leadership for this. So across the council, with what we know at the moment, we think we've got a good, viable project that provides an income and ticks other boxes as well. What I can't give you is a guarantee that won't change. But if it does change, then our thoughts may change around it. Solar is a good project. Renewables are a good project. We've got a number of renewables as a council we've looked at over a number of years and installed. With what I know at the moment and with the information we've got, it's a viable project.
Please. I've I'm the council's energy manager, obviously. I've been working with renewables since, solar specifically, since 1994 when I installed some on an economic development building for what was then Rumney Valley District Council. So they've been there 24 years, still operational, and they're still getting the output that they should be there. I've been a believer in renewables, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be in the job I'm in. It works, it's a pretty solid process and technology, solar systems. They tend not to, the degradation of them is very little. I've been following this from the Shine, what's called the Shine 20 project in Germany since the late 1980s. And they are now showing panels with 40-year plus life with less than 10% efficiency loss. So from my point of view, and knowing what we pay for energy, and knowing what we paid for energy over my local government career of 20-odd years, I think it's a viable and a cost-effective option. We're not going to be making vast sums of money from this. If we wanted to do that, we would have done that 10 years ago when the feed-in tariff and other subsidies were around. But the council did not make the decision at that time, so therefore, we didn't do it. So I'm a believer in it, and always has been, and always will be.
Sorry, can I just, David, I back up what Steve said. I've got within my group, we've got energy, I've got FM, I've got the maintenance section, I've got compliance as well. My number one priority is Teacock Solar Farm for my group. So I wouldn't put that as a priority if I didn't believe in this project being successful in delivering some long-term benefits to the council.
Okay, we'll move on. Giles, do you want to ask the next question, please?
What are the reasons for the British being dealt with as a separate issue on this? Because, it's a massive site, the British, plenty of sunshine. Is it because of the infrastructure, it's not on your power lines, or possibly just answer the question?
The British is certainly a potential for renewables, but we're dealing with it differently because the site is being dealt with differently effectively. As local member for that area, the British have got a long history, and it's not as easy, perhaps, to take forward the British at the moment because there's a number of other things that need to be considered all at the same time with the British as a package. So that's why we haven't ruled it out, but we've taken Teacock forward as a preferred, easier option, and certainly with things like a grid connection as well, for us to progress in the shorter term.
Okay, the next question. Norman, do you want to ask this one, please?
This refers to the other sites that failed your test. What reasons can you give, for the failure?
Yeah, the process obviously was we identified some of these sites from landownings that the council had. We looked at a series of criteria, closeness to a grid connection, because that can obviously give you a large capital cost up front. The ownership issues on the land, if there's any ownership issues, location, from irradiance levels, so we looked at irradiance issues. There was also issues around current land use there. For example, one of the areas we looked at, which we decided had an opportunity, was Fir Tree Farm. But as members may be aware, it's got a long-term lease with a tenant farmer. So therefore, we would need to how we would overcome that. And that could obviously have financial issues attached to it. So therefore, we looked at, there was a site adjacent to Teacock, but that was by the by the cemetery, and that was being used as a nature reserve. So there were all sorts of areas we looked at, and there was grid connection, irradiance, ownership issues, access to the site. So that really came out with our list from there of the ones we wanted to address first.
I'll ask the next question, because it's on a similar vein. If the project fails due to issues such as planning, permission being refused, or, for example, and this is the uncertainties that we discussed here, or problems, say, with a habitat study, will you consider re-looking at one or other of the other sites then?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, we mentioned the British earlier on. There's some common land issues and so on around there, which makes that a bigger project, really. But certainly, renewables on there, revisiting hydro, revisiting other technologies as well to see what we can do. We'll pick up, we're just going one at a time at the moment. We're not a massive team, so it's where we can fit in, really. Does that answer the question?
That's it. Any more questions on this locational issue before we move on? No? Sorry. Do you want to explore this further?
Thank you, Chair. It probably leads a bit into finance. I'm just wondering why we choose that 5M situation. Is it because we have that land available? Is it a better option than going for a 10 or a 15? What's the reason for the I know we moved to 3.85, but the initial one was for 5, wasn't it?
Generally, you need about 5 acres per megawatt for ground mount solar, and the Teacock site, in theory, is up to about 40. Excuse me. So on a first pass, when we had a budget estimate, so there's various different processes you go down to establish the grid cost. So there were a number of these sites that we will have asked for budget estimate figures on to establish where the viability is. It's actually quite rare to find affordable grid connections. They're really quite unusual. And the Teacock one is actually really good value for money. So initially we basically asked for some basic information on that. That's where that came from. As we've started to look at the site in more detail and understand the constraints, particularly around shading, and the overhead power lines that run at the south of that site, potentially some landscape issues, and also some of the aspirations of the Canal Trust, that scheme's kind of become trimmed back, as you would probably expect. It's still only based on an area at this stage, so as part of the procurement process, because it's a design and build contract, the contractor would actually do a final system sizing on it when they'd actually looked at those things.
Okay, thanks. I think if I can move on, Chair, to the financial, there are a couple of questions around this, so forgive me for this. I think, first of all, you stymied my great one in terms of assumptions. It's very difficult for us to understand that, and obviously you're a little bit tenuous in terms of those assumptions anyway because of the stage we're at. So perhaps if we can just push those to one side, but you can see it gives us very great difficulty in trying to find some clarity through the project. But I've got a couple of things around this. First of all, given that a council can look at longer term in terms of investment than a private company can, why have we gone for the rate of return that we have when there are actually, within the model, some larger rates of return in cash terms over the period shown?
I think that will be to do with it. We're talking about the financing costs here and spreading the loan over a longer period. So obviously the loan over a longer period, you pay interest for a longer period of time, you also pay a slightly higher rate of interest. Where we have a difficulty if we try to pay off too aggressively is you end up with negative cash flows in the early years. So what we've been trying to do is strike a balance between keeping the cash flow positive in the early years and making sure that you make as much as you can out of the scheme. That is ultimately a question for the council.
Yeah, I mean, we could possibly stand those losses because of the way council finances are run in the early years to get a better rate of return overall. So I'm just interested in why you asked that. The other thing relates to that is what are the numbers that sit behind the internal rate of return?
These are the figures we've had from the council's capital accountant. And once you've looked at, obviously, looking at the Public Works Loan Board, borrowing rates, etc., then we've put all the figures into, obviously, Joe's model, the financial model, and that then brings you sort of rate return in on that.
Could we see those numbers? Is that possible? because also allied to that, it would be good to see the numbers that were referred to earlier in terms of the all the underlying assumptions with this. At least we can see then, with a bit more clarity, what sits there.
Discussions are ongoing with our finance colleagues related to the scheme in general, but also about the points you mentioned about cash flow in and such like. I don't think there'd be any issues with sharing numbers with the committee with what we've got at the moment if there's further understanding needed or if that's beneficial to the committee soon.
Thank you, Chair. I think finally, it was one for clarification really. In 2.15 you talk about competitive grid connection, and also I want to know how do you actually secure a grid export capacity, and how is it secured in 2.15 but not so secure in 2.18, or am I misreading what it says?
If I explain a little bit more about the grid connection process. So basically, if you make a formal application to the network operator, in this instance Western Power Distribution, they will come back to you with a formal grid connection offer. And you then have a fixed term window to accept that. So they offer you a price. It's not a fixed price, but it's usually within that price. There's two elements to that. There's the Western Power element, and there's also potentially an element of National Grid infrastructure upgrade work, which isn't included in that offer at this stage. So what we've had back from Western Power is a grid connection offer with an initial stage payment of just over £2,500. And that first payment has been made to keep the offer live, because if you don't make that payment, then the offer falls away after 13 weeks. They will then have other milestones that they expect the council to meet within that, including submitting planning within a certain time and making payments. So we're in the process at the moment of trying to manage them through that process and keep them in the right place. We've gone back to them on the basis of a slightly smaller scheme. The offer that we've got is for a 5 megawatt connection, and off the top of my head it's about 145,000.
170.
Is it? But
Yeah.
they're indicating that there might be a slightly cheaper connection available to us because we want slightly less capacity, and that they will make a connection directly on the site. So we're waiting for them to come back with that piece of information, and we're also waiting for them to come back with the statement of works, which is that second bit of the offer that National Grid can come back with any additional charges on. So there wouldn't be an intention to make another stage payment until the council has signed off that they want to go to the next stage on the project, and also that we've got those other pieces of information. And at the moment you've reserved that capacity, nobody else can take that capacity from you, but if you don't meet the milestones or you don't make the payments, they will still take the offer back from you.
Thanks. Just two more, I promise. The other one, I was a little worried when we talk about a guarantee from Welsh Government in terms of this project. But Steve said that, look, when we set off, there's an amount that we are saving, there's an amount that we can sell. If the market changes, then we can save even more internally rather than sell it. And it can be slightly up or down in terms of the market. But why do we need a guarantee if we can do that?
Well, the guarantee gives you the basis to work your investment from. We know, obviously, if the energy prices increase and we're generating at the level we expect to generate, which is pretty, which we think is there, then there'll be more value to us if we then offset it against what we buy from the grid. If you take the Welsh Government guarantee, you've got that fixed price, it goes to the Welsh Government then distribute that energy through their procurement contracts. So that is shared across all of Wales within that procurement contract. But by looking at the PPA ourselves, through that process, we're edging basically our future costs. We're looking at how we can manage our future costs by alleviating some of that cost. Because if you look at an energy bill at the moment, only 40% of an energy bill is actually energy. 60% of it is government taxes, subsidies that's paid to renewables, nuclear, other areas. There's the management of it. There's the grid connection, the grid costs through the district network operator and through National Grid. So actually 40% of an energy bill is now, of an electricity bill, is now purely for the energy cost. And you can see that by looking at the cost of raw energy is around £50 a megawatt hour. You won't get an energy bill to tell you it's 50, that's 5 pence a kilowatt then. Okay?
Can I
you wouldn't see that.
just add a little bit about the Welsh Government as well in terms of what they're trying to do there and why they're trying to do it, because I think that might help you a little bit. So the conversation that we've been having with them is about whether the authorities would have the confidence to invest without some sort of price certainty. So their intention behind it is really to try and offer that, so that if it provides more confidence for authorities to proceed, because of state aid rules, they can't price that at anything other than slightly below the market. So they would expect you probably to do better on an open market forecast, because they can't offer anything else. I think they're fairly ambivalent whether you take it up or not. It is really there as a basically trying to get authorities to actually make the leap of faith and actually invest in the scheme.
Yeah, so it's just de-risking it slightly. I've never known Welsh Government to give anything away anyway, so it'll take it back in another hand, I suppose. But the last question relates to, in terms of 3.8, you're talking about other forms of, or other options for income generation. I just wonder whether you could expand on some of those, first of all, and then secondly, say why we're not exploring some of those now. Maybe a bit presumptuous, but...
That'll be around the PPA. One of the groups that I represent, some of the authorities on Wales, is with a group with Ofgem. And Ofgem are currently looking at different ways of the market and how the market operates. And you will see there's been changes in the last 2 years around metering and around metering costs, and some quite changes in metering costs. Some of our sites have seen higher metering costs because they had to move into a different band rate under the new Ofgem pricing markets. There are other contracts called contracts for difference, and also the capacity market, and this is for supporting National Grid at times of stress on the grid. So there are some large payments that can be got from National Grid for supporting the grid at a time of stress. At the moment, some of those are pricing at around about £70,000 a megawatt, so it's quite a substantial income potential. But currently, with the way PPAs are set up on the regulatory side of this, it would require changes to the regulations, to obviously the legislative changes. So Ofgem are looking at this. There is a trial going on at the moment in London with one of the energy companies and a couple of housing associations around how they can manage the billing for this, around solar that they've got on existing social housing in London, and how that can make changes and give better value. Until all these report and come back, they're still in the infancy, and it needs, as I say, regulatory and legislation changes that would allow us to take those forward.
Okay. Is that
Can I just briefly add to that? There may also be an opportunity somewhere in the Cwmbran area for private wire offtake as well, which is in effect where you directly connect to the user. And obviously, as has previously been mentioned, if 60% of your electricity bill is network charges and you plug in direct to somebody, they don't need to pay those network charges, which allows private wire arrangements generally to have a much higher PPA price. And we will continue to investigate opportunities for that as we go through the OBC process.
Okay, thank you. I think we've explored financial aspects as far as we wish today. We've just got 2 questions left, and I'm not sure, David. Yeah, I think we've covered the maintenance. So I'll ask the last question, perhaps, and this one is maybe Stephen. we were just wondering, Stephen, in terms of the impact on infrastructure, particularly roads in that area. There'll be extra traffic, etc. Now, just up the road, there's going to be potentially a new police HQ. Have those factors been taken into account when you're considering this project?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't, as an authority, prevent one project from happening. You know, in terms of planning legislation, you can't prevent a development because of the construction traffic. What you can look at is how you route that construction traffic appropriately. So, you know, in terms of the projects happening at the same time, if they do happen at the same time, you know, they're served by a relatively good network. T Cork is pretty much off Cumbrae Drive. Police College is off there's a reasonable network as well. Depending on the level of delivery, the type of delivery, it might be that not much. When we get into a bit more detail, there isn't that much conflict. But if we do see that there's potential conflict, we'll look to try and manage it through a traffic management program for either or both of the particular developments or any other development in that area.
That's fine, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, can I just... I think the police headquarters is going to be a much longer period than if this goes ahead at TCOR. We're forecasting something between 2 to 3 months to get the solar farm up and running. So that might help.
I was interested. Members, have we got any other issues we want to raise with the officers now? Last opportunity. Norma?
No, I'm just wondering if the officers have anything to give us that you think would help us to decide.
An invitation for you?
I think, and Joe will add now, but I think what we're after really from the committee is in principle thoughts. You know, going back to some of the comments we discussed earlier, we haven't got details of it yet, but you know, could reassure, as we said previously, that I can't see this project going ahead if it's not going to make us money, or if it's not going to be financially viable. Even if it does, do some of the other things which are in terms of environmental impacts are good and carbon reduction. So if we could perhaps give you that reassurance that it's an in-principle thing at the moment, rather than we're asking you to say yes or no to a 3.85 megawatt solar farm. But with those we expect to have those provisos, and would fully appreciate them.
Other issues, David?
I think
Sorry.
Sorry, I don't know if it helps or not, but just in terms of context, obviously we've been working as local partnerships right across Wales with local authorities, health boards and the like. And you're not alone. There are a number that are at this stage. In fact, Cardiff signed off on their Lambie Way scheme at Cabinet, I think last week or the week before. And I've got 2 or 3 other schemes that are either at this kind of point in the process. So there are others that are thinking about it and going through the same sort of questions. So
I know we have talked about the maintenance. We haven't talked about the cleaning of them, because they do need regular cleaning to maintain their full output. So just wondering whether that was taken into consideration. And just a general, I would like to see it there at TCOC. The only thing I'm trying to stress to everyone is how confident we were on the benefits to the council. I'd love to see it down there. So, but cleaning is important. They do need cleaning regularly.
I mean, at this stage, we've allowed a global figure for O&M, which includes the cleaning element to that. It's above what I would expect to see in the market at the moment. So we have got an element of cleaning. We've got an element of cyclical replacement in that number as well.
Can I just add one thing as well? One of the things we've been doing with this, as I've been going along with this, and I've been looking at this for quite a long time, quite a few years actually, I've thought this site would be suitable for this, but obviously the council had other priorities at the time. We are looking how we can engage the wider public with this as well, because we see it as being an opportunity to educate, the wider people to Torvine in the benefits of renewables as well. Been working with our colleagues in landscaping and obviously environment around the ecology, how we can actually live, work with the ecology, so that they feel protected in there as well. So it's not about swaying your decision anywhere there. It's just saying that we've got a lot of benefits we think it can deliver that are not tangible costs to at the moment we can put to that. but we think they're there to deliver.
On that point, Alan, after you've left, I'm going to be reading out some Facebook comments. You may want to on what the public thinks of this scheme. Not many, but they'll be on the record. Oh, shall I read them now? Well, yeah. There's only 3, but they're not that complimentary, but they're okay. I might, right. 3 comments we've received, and I'd like to thank members of the public who've gone to the trouble of putting these comments in. I know we're webcast. The first one, about 10 years behind, again, other council like Monmouthshire did this 5 years ago. Torvine planners will never win awards for innovation. That's the first comment. Second comment, it would be sufficient to house the energy farms on superstore car parks having dual roads, not using green spaces or land. Where our food chain suppliers are required, there are so many concrete car parks plus rooftop on commercial buildings. And the final comment, fit solar on all school buildings to generate electricity plus battery storage. Ground saw heat pumps for hot water. There's a little flavour of comments from the public, and I thank them again. Okay, so I've dealt with that. I'm slightly out of order, but I thought it fitted in with that, Alan.
On the last point, members are aware that there's no building regulations requirement to fit solar systems on schools. We have a minimum size we have to fit now, so if you look at all our 4 new schools, we've all got just over 10 kilowatts of solar panels on them.
Good point, Alan, and I hope that reassures the member of the public who submitted that very helpful comment. Alan?
Yeah, Chair, just on that one, I just wonder whether it's something to take on board whilst the officers are still here in terms of telling the public what has been done that's already sat there. We have the list sat in front of us on page 46 of all the issues in terms of photovoltaic pumps and so on. So perhaps we should tell the public a little bit more about what is there rather than just sit there and take some of these marks on the chin.
That's something we'll talk about, Alan, in a minute when we look at recommendations, I'm sure. I'd like to thank officers for their time and invite them to leave the meeting now so that the members here can facilitate their recommendation. I am, on behalf of the committee, very grateful for your helpful comments this morning. Thank you very much. Okay, the next part of the meeting now, colleagues, is for me to ask you for your thoughts in formulating our recommendations today. I'll just start with a preamble. The impression I'm getting from the committee that, in principle, we seem supportive of this, although a little bit concerned about uncertainties. I don't know if I read the mood of the meeting correctly, but that's my overall impression from the discussions this morning.
I feel a lot.
One at a time. Press your mic. No. Gainer first.
I feel a lot happier now. The report was very complicated. After listening to the officers, I feel a lot better over it now.
Jane?
Personally, I still got concerns and reservations about the costings and all. I think it's a bit wishy-washy, really, like some of that. And I couldn't really recommend this to go to Cabinet yet. I prefer it personally to come back to scrutiny with more concrete figures rather than saying if this, if that. I think it's a lot of money to be spending. Yes, a fantastic scheme. I'm all for green energy. But at the end of the day, we need to be 100% certain of the costings before scrutiny recommends it to go any further.
Kath might want to come in.
All I'll say on that is obviously we've got this period of time that we have to fit in with Western Power's grid offer. I think from what some of the things that officers were saying, that they'll have more information by the time Cabinet looks at it, and I think no one was asking you to categorically say that you were happy to go with absolutely everything that's in there because of the testing that they've got to do. They're wanting your support to go to the next stage, and as Joe said, they're going to be finalising the business case, where at the moment is only outline, and at that point it'll come back to scrutiny. But I don't think they're going to have the opportunity to provide you with what you're looking for so soon as to be able to continue and before it goes to Cabinet.
Yeah. When David first, I think you had your hand up. I'll come back.
For me, I hear what Kath's saying, and I see what you mean. For me, it was just more of a case of actually seeing that the officers believed in it. I wasn't really getting that off them. I forecast this and forecast that, and yes, it's a good idea, and let's tick the box. But for me, it was actually, do they actually believe in the scheme? I'd love to see it there. I think we need to do these things, but we also need to make sure that we're doing it with the premise that it's going to benefit the council. So that's the only thing for me.
Thank you, Chair. In principle, yes, I'd like to see it. I mean, we can always put in our recommendations, things like the long-term energy forecast, how accurate can they be with that, manage the risks and all that sort of thing, and engage with the wider public, and work with ecology. I think we can put all these things into our recommendations. I think in principle then, I'd like to see it go further.
Alan?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Norm in terms of the principle, but I think the difficulty I've got is if we look at our suggested scrutiny activity and the first para on the paper, in terms of developing a solar farm, again, in principle, great. But it's then asking us, is it therefore seen as suitable use of council resources? Well, I don't think we can decide that in isolation. It's what other pressures are, and that's really for somebody else to look at and come back with. In terms of strengthening the proposed business case for TCORC, then I think I'm happy with how they got to TCORC.
Yeah.
I think they probably demonstrated that.
Yeah.
Still worry about the assumptions, the rest of it underneath that, but I think in terms of looking at that side, I think that's the right side there. Then in terms of the appropriate option, in terms of scenarios to early years income and maximisation of total income, again, because of assumptions and because that's really a finance decision to say this is the best way for the council, given our cash flow position, given everything else, that needs to go somewhere else because that can't be done in isolation. I think the strategic context is right, taking the last point, but again, the economic and financial case, there's still some issues around that, but I think that there's a strategy and this ties in with that strategy, so it's made the strategic context. So I think there are some things that we can say, but there are lots of other imponderables that would be difficult for us to...
I mean, the mode I think that REC should put forward is, in principle, we're supportive of the development of this solar farm. Yeah. However, the Cabinet, when they look at this, have to have more robust sort of financial information and real, there has to be a lot more detailed financial scrutiny. If we can, are you happy if we put the recommendation forward in those terms, as that's the general recommendation?
That's what you just said.
No, I'm just, this, obviously we've come up with a number of reservations today, and Stephen in particular was talking about uncertainties, and we, particularly Alan, I'm grateful to Alan today, we were exploring them in quite some depth, and I take your point, David, that you're not convinced, but I think the uncertainty you're getting is because it's not everything's firmed up yet.
But all I'm trying to say is there needs to be, if it's fine to do it, and let's do it, that's great, as long as Torvine Council benefits from it, and the general public. That's all I'm trying to put across,
Yeah, and when we phrase this recommendation, there has to be more robust data figures to support this case, I mean, as officers, I mean, generally public bodies are risk averse, and obviously, the financial people are going to scrutinise this in huge detail. That would be an expected thing because there'll be, internal and external audit looking at this in the future. So I think we are going to support this in principle. so, subject to some of those reservations we've put. Now, I don't think we need a huge number of recommendations today, but were there any, that's the main recommendation I think comes out of today, because it is it's a narrow subject in a sense, solar farm on one site. Do we want any more, I think...
Sorry, I think, Chair, you've encapsulated, the majority of it, haven't you? Sorry, Kathy.
The only thing I was going to add is, do you want to add in what you were saying about making the public aware of what we've done up until now and promote that as well as keeping them involved in what we're doing going forward?
Sorry, yes, given some of the comments, I think that should happen as soon as possible. Yeah.
That's a good one. Norma?
Can we say that the T Coch site is a brownfield site, and we agree with that site, because I think it's a good site. I think they have picked the best, Yeah,
I mean, it was previously the tip. No. I mean, just Councillor Ashley is new today. I mean, clearly they'll have to look at the ecological habitat.
Engage with the wider public to us being said, and work with the ecology officer. Things like that. Put all those things in it. Yeah.
Alan, what about this business you raised about?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I forget her name, but she's Jo. She did state that there were numbers behind a lot of this in more detail. It would be good if we could have sight of those. It's probably just for information, though, if they'd taken those onto a further stage. And also to see the numbers behind the internal rate of return that's proposed.
I think that's enough, actually. Members, I don't think we need any more than that. So, with that then, I will now close the meeting. Sorry.
There was one I forgot about. I did ask if we could see some examples of other projects and the output in terms of those, which she said she had information on.
Okay.
Which
we'll ask for that.
Be a benefit.
That's fine. Okay. With that, I'll close the meeting. Just a couple of things. I remind members that we've got the visioning session next week on the 27th of June. And finally, I'd just like to thank members, officers and invitees for attending and contributing to the meeting. I thought the meeting went well today. Thank you very much. I'm now going to close the meeting to the press and the public.